The story begins in the picturesque town of Maplewood, a small community nestled amidst rolling hills and sprawling meadows. Life here moves at a slower pace, and its residents take pride in their closely knit relationships. On this particular day, the town is abuzz with excitement. The annual Maplewood Community Festival, a much-anticipated event, has transformed the Central Park into a lively scene of colorful stalls, laughter, and music. Among the festival goers is Lena Johnson, a 17-year-old girl whose radiant smile and infectious energy make her a beloved figure in the community. Lena, a proud African-American teenager, lives with her father, Marcus Johnson, a retired Navy SEAL known for his quiet strength and unwavering love for his daughter. Together, they share a modest but warm home on the outskirts of town. Lena has always been a dreamer, with ambitions as vast as the open skies above Maplewood. Her love for music is one of her defining traits, and this year's festival is particularly special for her. She's been chosen to perform alongside her best friends in a musical act that she has spent months preparing for. The group, affectionately named Harmony Roots, represents a mix of cultures and talents, reflecting Lena's belief in the power of unity. As Lena strolls through the festival grounds, she takes in the sights and sounds with a sense of wonder. The aroma of freshly baked goods wafts through the air, mingling with the laughter of children on carnival rides. Vendors call out to passers-by, showcasing handmade crafts, local produce, and an array of colorful trinkets. Everywhere she looks, Lena sees faces both familiar and new, each one a reminder of the community's vibrant spirit. However, beneath the surface of this idyllic scene lies a subtle tension. Lena has noticed the occasional sideways glance and overheard whispers from a few individuals who view her presence with skepticism. Growing up in Maplewood has taught her to navigate these moments with grace. But today she senses a different kind of unease, a feeling she can't quite shake. Despite this, Lena's focus remains on her performance. The makeshift stage at the center of the park is adorned with string lights and banners, creating an atmosphere of celebration. She and her friends have poured their hearts into their music, and Lena is determined to give the audience a show they won't forget. As the sun begins to set, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, Lena gathers with her friends backstage. Her guitar, a gift from her father, rests securely in her hands. Marcus watches proudly from the crowd, his piercing gaze scanning the area as if on instinct. While Lena prepares to step into the spotlight, Marcus can't help but feel a familiar twinge of vigilance. His years in the military have taught him to trust his gut, and tonight, something feels off. Lena takes a deep breath as her name is announced, and the crowd erupts into applause. Stepping onto the stage, she smiles brightly, her heart pounding with excitement. For a moment, the worries of the world fade away, leaving only the music and the joy it brings. Little does she know, this night will mark the beginning of a journey that will test her resilience, courage, and the unbreakable bond she shares with her father. Lena's work in the bustling heart of the city had always been a delicate balance between hope and despair. By day, she advocated for underserved communities in her district, tirelessly organizing events to promote unity. By night, however, the darker truths of the city became unavoidable. Graffiti with hateful slogans defaced walls, and whispers of a dangerous gang called the Iron Fangs, known for their openly racist ideology, spread fear among marginalized groups. It began with rumors, small but chilling. Local shopkeepers reported intimidation. Graffiti messages warned outsiders to stay in their place. Lena, unwilling to turn a blind eye, started documenting these incidents with the intent of presenting them to the authorities. But as her investigation deepened, it became clear the Iron Fangs weren't just a petty group of vandals. They were organized, dangerous, and had ties to corrupt officials in the city's power structure. One evening, Lena attended a community meeting in a small, run-down church, where residents shared stories of harassment. A man named Raphael, a second-generation immigrant who ran a local grocery store, recounted a recent encounter. The Iron Fangs had smashed his windows, spray-painted racial slurs across his storefront, and threatened his family. His voice trembled with fear and anger as he told the group, "If we don't fight back, they'll destroy everything we've worked so hard for." Moved by the community's plight, Lena vowed to take action. She partnered with Victor, an enigmatic former soldier who had once tangled with the Iron Fangs himself. Victor had first-hand knowledge of the gang's operations, though his reasons for opposing them remained personal and unclear. Despite his reluctance to share details, Lena sensed his deep-seated anger against the gang and welcomed his expertise. Their alliance marked the beginning of Lena's descent into the underbelly of the city. Victor led her to the outskirts, where the Iron Fangs operated freely, unchallenged by law enforcement. There, she saw their influence firsthand. Their symbol, a snarling wolf surrounded by iron chains, was everywhere, emblazoned on walls, carved into playground equipment, and even painted across small businesses that had succumbed to their extortion. But confrontation became inevitable when Lena stumbled upon a secret Iron Fangs gathering, hidden in an abandoned warehouse. The gang was rallying. Their leader, a tall, imposing man with a shaved head and a wolf tattoo across his neck, spewing vitriol to a cheering crowd. His words fueled the gang's sense of superiority, dehumanizing anyone who didn't fit their warped ideals. Hidden behind crates in the shadows, Lena and Victor listened. Victor's fists clenched as the leader spoke, his calm facade cracking under the weight of old memories. But it was Lena who captured the scene on her phone, determined to expose the gang's rhetoric to the public. The tension reached a boiling point when Lena accidentally knocked over a metal pipe, the clanging sound echoing through the cavernous warehouse. The crowd fell silent, heads turning toward the noise. Victor reacted instantly, pulling Lena into a narrow corridor. "Run," he hissed, his voice sharp and commanding. They sprinted into the night, chased by the Iron Fangs enforcers. Victor's military training proved invaluable as he navigated the maze of industrial buildings, leading Lena to safety. But the close call cemented the reality of their mission. They were no longer merely observers. The Iron Fangs had noticed them, and retaliation was inevitable. In the days that followed, Lena faced escalating threats. An anonymous letter slipped under her apartment door warned her to stay out of matters that don't concern you. The letter was accompanied by a wolf's fang, a sinister token she recognized from the gang's emblem. Victor, meanwhile, revealed more about his past. He had once been a part of a vigilante group targeting the Iron Fangs, but had abandoned the cause after a disastrous mission left several innocents caught in the crossfire. "I can't make the same mistakes again," he told Lena. "But this time, with you, we can do it right." Their strategy shifted. Lena rallied her community, organizing peaceful demonstrations to draw attention to the Iron Fangs' activities. Victor provided intel, helping them avoid violent confrontations while keeping the gang under pressure. Together, they hoped to undermine the Iron Fangs' control without falling into the same cycle of violence. However, as the gang's retaliation intensified, Lena and Victor found themselves cornered. The Iron Fangs weren't just targeting them, they were escalating their reign of terror across the city. Lena realized that exposing the gang's crimes might not be enough. To truly make a difference, she would have to face them head-on, risking everything she had built to dismantle their hate-filled empire. Lena felt the tension the moment Derek and his gang started paying attention to her. Her heart raced every time she caught the cold, menacing gaze of Derek, as if he was trying to diminish her, as though her very existence was an unacceptable threat. His gang lingered nearby, making no effort to hide their hostility. She wondered how much longer she could avoid their piercing stares, and what would happen if Derek didn't stop harassing her. Lena tried to keep her fear in check. She continued to participate in the festival, throwing herself into the activities she and her friends had worked so hard to prepare for over the past month. But even as she tried to focus, she couldn't shake the feeling that their eyes were on her. Every step she took, every laugh she shared with her close friends, seemed to have a shadow hanging over it, like the danger could erupt at any moment. It was hard to ignore the constant surveillance of Derek's group. The chuckling sounds from their direction felt like knives, cutting straight into her spirit. She couldn't help but feel that everything would change if she didn't pay attention to them. But how could she just ignore them when they were watching her every move? And soon enough, she started sensing a vague presence behind her, as if someone was always watching, always lurking with her every step. One afternoon, as she prepared for her performance, Lena noticed that Derek's gang had stopped keeping their distance. They stood too close now, close enough that Lena could feel their breath on her neck, the scent of cigarettes and alcohol wafting from their jackets. She heard a low voice, almost a whisper, but full of menace. "You wouldn't want anyone to know your secrets, would you?" The voice came from one of Derek's gang members, a guy Lena barely recognized except for his black leather jacket and messy brown hair. She tried to keep her composure, but her body trembled. How could they keep bothering her? A girl who just wanted to enjoy the festival she'd worked so hard on? As Derek's group moved in closer, Lena felt trapped, cornered, with no way to escape. The festival grounds were crowded, and she felt more confined with each passing second. The sense of unease overwhelmed her as she thought about the worst possible scenarios. How much longer could she endure this? Waiting for something to break? Was there a way out of this without escalating the situation? Just then, a strong hand landed on her shoulder, causing her to startle and spin around. It was her father, Marcus Johnson. She couldn't help but feel a wave of relief seeing him standing there, a rock-solid presence in the midst of the chaos. He didn't say a word but simply stood there, his presence alone making Derek's group pause. They didn't dare continue their advances with Marcus standing next to Lena. Lena looked up at her father, her eyes filled with gratitude, but also a touch of worry. "Dad, I'm fine. I can handle this," she said, her voice trembling. But Marcus simply shook his head. "You can't always handle everything on your own, Lena," he said, his voice calm yet firm. "Don't ever let yourself be afraid and not ask for help when you need it." With Marcus by her side, Derek's gang retreated, but Lena knew that the threat wasn't gone. Not completely. It lingered, like a shadow that wouldn't dissipate. She turned back to look at her father, a deep sense of appreciation filling her heart. But it was in that moment that she realized that some things in life couldn't be changed by personal strength alone, and the support of family was the most important source of courage. She silently thanked the universe for having her father there to protect her. Despite Derek's gang backing off for the moment, Lena couldn't shake the lingering sense of unease that weighed on her. The threat from Derek's group didn't vanish just because her father had stepped in. She realized that the problem wasn't just a one-time confrontation. It was a long-term campaign, an attack on her freedom, on how she was allowed to exist in this community. The sharp glares continued to follow her every time she entered crowded spaces. The feeling of being watched didn't dissipate. Instead, it seemed to grow, making her feel like a hunted animal. Lena knew she couldn't accept this for much longer. She was strong, confident, and she couldn't let fear dictate her life. But the question was, how could she face a danger that wasn't always visible? When the enemy lurked in the shadows, when every step she took could be seen as a provocation, Lena began to think about what she could do. Raised in a family with a strong foundation, her father a Navy SEAL, her mother a teacher, Lena had learned that sometimes the fight wasn't physical but mental. She couldn't combat these threats with violence, but she could do something even stronger. Something that would not only protect her, but also uplift the entire community. Growing up, Lena had always admired those who stood up for what was right, who spoke out when they saw injustice. She'd witnessed passionate protests and movements in her community, where people, regardless of the hardships, had spoken out for their rights. She understood that true change came from the community, from people who were willing to rise up and confront wrongs together. So, Lena decided to take action. She wouldn't let fear control her anymore. She began organizing community events to raise awareness about racial discrimination and violence, creating spaces where people could discuss these issues openly. She wanted the people of Maplewood to understand that racism and hostility had no place in a civilized society, and if they didn't stand up against it, their silence would only make it worse. One of the first events Lena organized was a seminar called Living Together in Peace, Unity and Diversity. She invited social experts, community activists, and people with experience dealing with racial discrimination to share their stories and perspectives. She also invited members of Derek's gang, not with the hope of changing their views immediately, but to show that she wasn't afraid to face them. What was important was that she wanted to create a space where people could discuss and listen to each other. With the help of friends and family, Lena put together workshops, group activities, and media campaigns to amplify her message. She used art, music, and culture to connect with the community. Each event had a clear goal: to create an environment where racism and hostility could not thrive. However, not everyone supported Lena. Her actions began to draw attention from extremists, and Derek's gang wasn't about to sit idly by. They began to escalate their threats, not just harassing her, but also intimidating those who participated in her events. They left threatening messages on phones, spray-painted racist symbols on walls, and even started organizing small rallies against the changes Lena was advocating. But instead of disheartening Lena, these challenges only fueled her determination. She realized that the fight wouldn't be easy, but that didn't mean she could give up. The more resistance she faced, the more she understood the stakes. It was no longer just about her. It was about the community, about standing up for what was right. Even when the odds seemed stacked against her, her father, Marcus, continued to keep a quiet watch over Derek's gang, ensuring that no harm came to Lena during this increasingly volatile time. Despite his military background, Marcus understood that the power of this fight wasn't in physical force but in resilience. In standing strong together as a community, Lena could feel his silent support every time she spoke out, every time she organized another event. The tension between Lena and Derek's gang was now at its peak. The fight for justice was no longer a small skirmish. It had become a battle for the very soul of Maplewood. Every step Lena took seemed to bring her closer to an inevitable final showdown. After weeks of preparation and quiet resistance, her conflict with Derek and his gang had grown increasingly intense. Lena had braced herself for this moment, but no one could have predicted how it would unfold. She had kept pushing forward, organizing community events, and rallying people to stand up against racism and violence. But now, Derek and his gang were ready to make their move. Lena was leading a peaceful protest, calling on the community to denounce violence and discrimination. The crowd was large, filled with people passionate about creating change, their energy palpable. But just as the event reached its peak, Derek and his gang appeared. This time, they weren't staying in the shadows. They came right up to the gathering, causing trouble and exerting pressure on the participants. Derek, with his usual smugness, marched up to Lena, his eyes full of malice. Unlike the previous encounters, there was no attempt to hide his hostility now. He stepped forward, sneering at her. "You really think you can change anything around here? What do you think someone like you can do?" he spat, his voice thick with contempt. Lena held her ground. She met his gaze with unwavering determination. "I'm not just fighting for myself," she replied, her voice steady. "I'm fighting for everyone who's been oppressed in this community, and I won't let anyone stand in the way of justice." The tension in the air thickened, and Lena could feel the weight of the moment. Her heart raced, but she knew she couldn't back down now. People in the crowd began to stand up, ready to support her. But they, too, hesitated, unwilling to escalate the situation into violence. The standoff was at its breaking point when, unexpectedly, a figure moved through the crowd. Stepping into the confrontation, it was Marcus, Lena's father. Marcus arrived just in time, his presence an immediate force of calm amidst the chaos. He moved between Lena and Derek, his posture strong, unwavering. But what surprised everyone wasn't just Marcus stepping in to protect his daughter. It was the revelation that Marcus was no ordinary man. He was a Navy SEAL, a military man trained to handle situations just like this, with a level of discipline and control that only someone with his background could bring to bear. Derek, taken aback by Marcus's sudden appearance, was visibly thrown off. He had expected Lena to be alone, vulnerable, but facing Marcus was a different story. The man standing before him was no mere civilian. He was a trained fighter, a protector. Derek's bravado faltered for a moment, but his arrogance pushed him to challenge Marcus, his voice dripping with venom. "What are you going to do? Huh? You think you can stop me?" Marcus's eyes locked onto Derek's, his tone calm but lethal. "You can threaten me all you want, but you will not harm my daughter. And I will not let you destroy what we've worked so hard to build here." There was a tense silence as Derek assessed the situation. He looked around, seeing the community members who had gathered to support Lena, standing firm against him. It was clear to him now that this wasn't just a fight with Lena. It was a fight for the soul of the community itself. He took a step back, his anger bubbling beneath the surface. But the growing unity of the people surrounding him made him hesitate. Lena stood tall, beside her father, feeling an overwhelming sense of strength. She could see the fear in Derek's eyes, the uncertainty of a man who had spent his life controlling others through fear but now found himself facing something greater, something unbreakable. Then, in a flash of movement, Derek lunged forward, trying to land a blow. But Marcus was faster, blocking his attack with ease. The tension reached a boiling point. The community held its breath, waiting for what would happen next. But in that moment, Marcus showed a calmness that was almost unsettling, a reminder of the experience he carried with him from years of military service. He didn't need to fight aggressively. He only needed to show Derek that this wasn't his fight to win. Marcus turned to Lena, his voice low but full of meaning. "This is not just about us. It's about what we stand for, what this community stands for. And we're not backing down." Derek, realizing he was no longer in control, attempted one last desperate move. But the unity of the people around him, the strength of Marcus, and the courage in Lena's eyes made it clear he had lost. His gang, sensing the defeat in their leader, began to step back, unwilling to face the full force of the community's resolve. With a final glare at Lena and Marcus, Derek and his gang retreated, disappearing into the shadows they had come from. The crowd erupted in applause, not for the violence that didn't happen, but for the courage that had been shown in the face of real danger. Lena and Marcus stood together, their bond stronger than ever, knowing that this was only the beginning of their fight for justice. In the aftermath, Lena felt a deep sense of pride, not just for herself, but for the community that had rallied behind her. And as she looked at her father, she realized that this moment wasn't just about defeating an enemy. It was about revealing the strength of what they were fighting for, a future where unity and equality would prevail. Marcus, ever the protector, simply smiled at Lena. "You're stronger than you know," he said softly. And with that, they both knew that, together, they could face whatever came next. As the dust settled and the confrontation with Derek and his gang became a distant memory, Lena stood amidst the crowd, her heart still racing but filled with a sense of triumph. The tension that had hung over her for weeks had finally dissipated, but the lessons learned from the struggle remained etched in her mind. It was a victory not just for her, but for the entire community of Maplewood. Lena had done more than simply defend herself and her beliefs. She had sparked a movement that would carry on far beyond that day. Derek and his gang, now facing the consequences of their actions, were quickly apprehended by the authorities. The justice that had eluded so many for years was now finally within reach. It wasn't just the police who took action. It was the people of Maplewood who stood united, refusing to let fear dictate their future. The events of the past weeks had changed the community forever, and Lena had played a pivotal role in that transformation. The day after the protest, the town gathered once again, but this time the air was different. It was filled with hope, with the promise of change. People from all walks of life, young and old, came together in a display of solidarity that sent a powerful message to everyone. Hatred and violence would no longer be tolerated. In the wake of the confrontation, there was a collective sense of responsibility to protect one another, to make sure that what had happened to Lena would never happen again. Lena's resolve had never been clearer. She had faced fear, hatred, and violence head-on, and come out on the other side stronger, more determined than ever. But the journey hadn't been easy. She had to learn the hard way that standing up for what was right often came at a personal cost. The fear of retaliation, the anxiety of never knowing when the next threat would appear. It was a weight she had carried for so long. But with the support of her community and the unwavering love of her father, Lena had found the courage to keep going. Her father, Marcus, had always been a steady presence in her life, But this experience had brought them even closer. He had protected her from harm. But more than that, he had taught her the importance of standing up for herself and for others. He had shown her that real strength came from within, from the willingness to face adversity and never back down. In the quiet moments after the storm, Lena had time to reflect on everything that had happened. She thought about the people who had stood by her, those who had offered support, who had shared their own stories of struggle, and who had believed in the cause. She realized that the fight she had waged was not just hers alone. It was the fight of every person who had ever faced injustice, every person who had ever been silenced by fear. And that was why she couldn't stop now. The experience had also deepened her understanding of the complexities of community and activism. It wasn't enough to simply show up at a protest or make a speech. True change required consistent effort, collaboration, and a willingness to confront uncomfortable truths. Lena had learned that it was easy to get caught up in the emotions of the moment. But the real work was in building lasting relationships, in creating spaces where people felt safe to express themselves, and in fighting for systemic change. As the days passed and the community began to heal, Lena found herself once again at the heart of the movement. She worked alongside local leaders to organize more events, to engage with schools and organizations, and to continue raising awareness about the issues that mattered most. But it wasn't just about fighting against hatred anymore. It was about building something better. It was about creating a future where every person, regardless of their race, gender, or background, had the opportunity to thrive. Lena knew that the road ahead would not be without its challenges. There would be setbacks, there would be moments of doubt, and there would be people who would try to undermine the progress they had made. But she had learned a valuable lesson in resilience. She had seen firsthand that when people come together, when they support one another and stand up for what is right, they can overcome even the greatest of obstacles. Marcus, too, had learned something during this journey. He had always been a protector, a man of few words, but his actions spoke volumes. He had kept a watchful eye on Lena, not just as a father, but as someone who understood the importance of creating a safe world for those you love. His experiences in the military had taught him that sometimes the most powerful way to protect those you care about is not through force, but through love, patience, and understanding. One evening, as Lena sat with her father on the porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon, she turned to him with a smile. "I couldn't have done it without you," she said softly. Marcus, always humble, simply nodded. "You had it in you all along. I just helped you see it." In that moment, Lena understood. She understood that the strength she had found wasn't just about fighting the battles in front of her. It was about the quiet moments of support, the shared wisdom, and the love that connected her to everyone around her. It was about building a foundation of trust and understanding, where everyone could rise together, and together, they could create something better. As Lena continued her work, she knew the path would never be easy, but she was ready. The lessons she had learned would guide her in every decision, every step forward. The community of Maplewood had become a beacon of hope for what could be achieved when people refused to stay silent, when they refused to accept injustice. And Lena knew that as long as she stayed true to herself and her values, there was nothing they couldn't accomplish. The story of Lena Johnson didn't end with Derek's defeat. It was just the beginning of something much bigger. A movement had been sparked, one that would continue to grow and evolve, touching lives far beyond the borders of Maplewood. And Lena, with her courage, her father's wisdom, and the unwavering support of her community, would lead the way into a brighter, more united future.